Good evening, everyone. This is Rob Anderson, Louisiana's 3rd Congressional District, running for Congress. You caught me trying to fix my hair. I got still got a little bit of quarantine hair there. Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. This is Swampside Chats. We renumbered them pre and post pandemic outbreak quarantine specifically. So when it says season 2, episode 3, which is what this is, we're actually on number 8 or 9, but we lost count. So now you know the machinery behind the scenes. That's why it was numbered that. From here on out, there shouldn't be any more than a season 2. They should just be numbered from here on out. Okay. So again, we're here with our campaign team behind the scenes, the ones who are doing my fact checking and monitoring the questions. Feel free to ask questions live. We do have some that were submitted ahead of time. With me is Claire, of course, campaign manager Claire. And over on yonder side, to me, to you, it's invisible, is Dave.
Howdy.
And of course, as always, we're going to try to fact check everything for you. We try to give you good information. And that's what these Swampside Chats are about. So I'll give you a couple minutes of background. A lot of you followed me already, so you know what's going on. Some of you may be seeing me for the first time. So how y'all doing? Sorry, I'm not taller. My name is Rob Anderson. I'm a former IT and blue collar guy who, after the last time I worked in drilling was when I was 48 years old, 3 years ago. That was my last. Then I decided, since my kids were grown, I could get involved in politics and really commit to public service. So that's what I've been doing ever since. Just trying to help people of our state. We need a lot of help because of our entrenched politics, which are based on corporate donations. So basically, the people who are in your elected offices are not necessarily who you'd want, but who corporations really like having there. So we're running a grassroots campaign. Been pretty successful so far. Started getting the message out. All we are is about honest representation for the people, inclusion, diversity, alternative solutions to problems that don't necessarily have the answer oil. Now, we're not anti-oil, of course, although that's one thing I'm sure my opponent's going to try to run on later this year. We are pro all industry. Jobs are good. But we do believe that if, BP dumps a couple million barrels of oil in our Gulf and ruins our fishing industries and our inlets, that they should probably pay to clean it up. So that's all that being a Democrat means. It means environmental and corporate responsibility. What else are we running on? We're running on growth. The main thing we want for this district is alternative industries, new industries, good jobs for the people that aren't just what we have. We need to move into the 21st century. We love alternative energies such as solar. We love high-tech industries. We love software programming. And people analyze how you get those sort of industries into your region. And it's a very simple equation that we figured out, and seemingly nobody else in the state has. Possible exception, John Bell, our great governor, is you boost your region's education, infrastructure, and healthcare, and that attracts industries, good jobs. What solar energy means to Louisiana, it means it's an $8 billion worth of jobs for all the people here in this state. They're good paying jobs. They're tech jobs, easily trained. You don't have to get a 4-year degree necessarily to do it. So that's what we talk about when we talk about boosting education and infrastructure. It is so that we can get better industries here. Y'all, I'm sure, noticed a couple of weeks back when the oil market had an interesting day and night and, ended up at negative $36 a barrel on the commodities trading. Which means basically that the oil industry hits a bit of a recession. It's cheap gas, good for most of the country, not so good for Louisiana. We need to diversify so that no one industry peaks and valleys affect the region. We want people to be employed and to be able to suffer minor recessions here and there because our industry is so diversified. And we have great agriculture in the state. We have a lot of things. We run, obviously, seafood, major industry down here. A large portion of the shipping that happens in the United States goes down the Mississippi River, comes right through our state. So Louisiana is important to the United States, and we'd like to boost our own the quality of life for the people living in it. We're not, looking for handouts because we don't produce anything or do anything. We, The people in Louisiana are good, loyal people who love good food, good music, and would like good jobs. And that's what we're boosting. We want better jobs for everybody. And that's the majority of our platform. So all that being said, since most of y'all follow me at Rob Anderson 2018 on Twitter, of course, is a large part of the footprint. Rob Anderson for Louisiana on YouTube, I believe. But if you're seeing this now, you're probably on YouTube or AOC. And of course, Rob Anderson for Louisiana on Facebook. The website is www.robandersonforcongress.com. Very easy to figure out. And of course, LinkedIn and personal Facebook and Instagram. And good luck finding those because they're not part of the campaign. They're just my personal stuff. But, I'm pretty easy to Google, as we discovered yesterday when we found out all the articles I'm tagged in that I had never searched before. So, yeah, the footprint's out there. Our message is getting out there. We're a populist campaign, and, it's starting to get real. So it's a lot of fun. So what we're going to be talking about today, obviously, we have pre-submitted questions and, ask live. Can you see this? SP Johnson says, by the way, let me interrupt just a second. And yes, obviously I can. Excuse me. Is obviously what's happening to the entire country and the entire world. As a matter of fact, it's the COVID-19 pandemic, and our own state has a phase one of reopening that the governor's office just released the other day, which will begin Friday, May 15th. And then we'll be talking about that and questions that y'all have about the job, which is the United States House of Representatives. By the way, it's a federal job. A lot of times people don't understand exactly which municipalities, parishes, police juries, state, federal. So feel free to ask any questions. And then, if I kind of sorted out that that's a state issue and here's what we would do, don't feel chastised. Ask all the questions. It's all good. I'm learning a lot myself. Who actually controls all these things? And Hagatha says, "Hey, Rob, how you doing?" Okay. I think we're ready for the first question, unless y'all want to just hear me talk to myself for an hour, which there's the vote. So first question. Now, last time we've heard feedback that sometimes you can't hear the question. So Claire will ask me the question. I'll repeat it and then I'll answer it for you. Sure.
So the first one we got was from Demetra.
Hi, Demetra.
1964 and 2014.
Mhm.
Do you have any ideas as far as legislation on how to curtail states passing any voting restrictions?
Okay, that's a very good question, Demetra. Thank you for sending that in today. What Clara just asked is a question from Demetra. That the Supreme Court gutted the 1964 Voting Rights Act in 2014. So what steps would I take in legislation if I made it to the House of Representatives to curtail, to fight back against that? And obviously the first and most obvious is let's reinstate the 1964 Voting Rights Act, what was stripped down in 2014. The reason being that there were specific preemptions within the bill that the federal law supersedes state. So the legislation is already there. Why was it deregulated? Why have we made it easier for votes to be suppressed? And I think the fundamental core of our democracy or constitutional republic, people argue about it. We are a constitutional republic, which is an element of democracy. One of the cores of it is that we each have the right and the duty to vote. And anything that impedes that, it impedes a core right of every American citizen. And so obviously we must push back against gerrymandering and other voter suppression tactics to make sure that it is absolutely easy for every single citizen to vote, while at the same time protecting the integrity. And obviously most our elections, one of the beacons of the world that we've been has been to be an example of free and fair elections, and we need to get that back to make sure there is no cheating going on. Both sides accuse the other of cheating, but we actually keep that number very low. However, we have to adapt to the 21st century. There are ways of altering. People fear that there are ways of altering votes that didn't exist 100 years ago. And ironically, on that note, Voting by mail has been done in the U.S. since at least the Civil War, correct? And that is our current Republican position, that voting by mail, which we have been doing for 150 years, is somehow bad. So I don't know how to agree with that. So I'm going to have to go ahead and disagree with that. And I think voting by mail, especially in a pandemic, we're gathering in social groups, is probably a bad idea. That you have an invisible virus, but voting by mail is proven technology. And I think in the last election, there were something like 4 instances of voter fraud, and of course they were all for the Republican candidate's favor, shall we say. So voter fraud is a real thing, but it's not in the proven methods we have. And another thing we absolutely need to do is to make it easier to vote. It should be easy to vote. It should be easy to vote securely. And it is our job as representatives, if we get there, to make sure that you can vote in whatever way is convenient and reliable. And yes, I'd love to have the presidential election day, and matter of fact, the election day every year, I'd like it to have it to be a national holiday. That's all separate legislation. I think it should absolutely be simple to vote so that we'd get approaching anywhere near 100% turnout, which we never do. But I really think a lot of people are wasting. The only voice you have in your government is your vote. And to fail to use that is to abdicate, to act like the government is a separate thing. Well, the government is us. So yeah, damn sure we're all going to get involved. You should get involved. We do have live questions. Are you following it on YouTube as well? So that no, that's what I meant. I wanted to make sure you had control of it. Shorten the answer. Sorry about that. Okay, the question was, what is my position on the state of the mental health system nationally? It's obviously a very complex question, and I'm going to try to keep it brief. One of the things is we really need to pay more attention to mental health, which is obvious. Addictions need to be treated like diseases and not put into the criminal justice system. We need to follow the data and follow the science. We need better conditions for it, because a lot of times the most vulnerable in our society are the ones who are overlooked, short-sighted by the current way we treat mental health. Veterans with PTSD, the suicide rate for veterans, the most common statistic you hear all the time, and it's so awful that people don't really want to hear it. It's 22 a day, 22 veterans a day, and not to mention civilians. We don't necessarily treat either one worse, but that calls attention to the problem that people who go through heavy trauma are not getting the treatment they need. We need to stop incarcerating people for being mentally ill, but to treat it like a disease. Schizophrenia is not a crime, it's a condition. And that's the brief point. Yes, we need to pay more attention to that because we need better healthcare, and that should be under healthcare. And we already know that healthcare is a very complicated issue that we're going to go on and on about. So we'll move on to the next question. What is the outlook for business in Louisiana postal? It's one of our favorite subjects. We talk about it all the time. Alternative industries and attracting them here and getting them to take root so that our children grow up to be software designers. There's nothing wrong with blue collar work. You're preaching to the choir. Construction, welding, plumbing, oil drilling. We love them all. Some people like to work with their hands. It's all good industry. But we need, solar power. 1, there's the green effect. Obviously, it's better for the environment. 2, it's renewable. And after the investment, energy ultimately becomes cheaper. And, cheaper electricity ultimately leads to, more electric cars, which is also better for the environment. It's an entire cycle that we go on. If industry can have a place to commit because they have a good region for it. Anything that prioritizes renewable industries, better healthcare, and high-tech jobs are all what we want to attract to this area. We're not anti-oil, we're just pro other things as well. And I hope that answers your question. Yep, sorry, pause on the next one. Okay. Okay, congressional committees, that's a good one, because I think most freshman congressmen don't necessarily get the best committees, but the ones I would be interested in are, of course, the science, technology, and space committee. shorthanded, the NASA committee, the one that oversees NASA, obviously science and space, or like my nerd-like fascination. And I definitely think that expansion into outer space is the future. And we need to account for that. It's not the biggest part of our budget, but it is important. Learning is important. New frontiers are important. Obviously, the Committee on Natural Resources, Committee on Natural Resources, which addresses environmental issues, which are a major part of life in Louisiana. We're right here on the Gulf, and coastal erosion and saltwater intrusion are, our land mass changes every day. The maps change. So I'd love to be on that committee. And of course, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, because I think economic development down here in the South in the Gulf region is the primary reason we need to invest in the South. Specifically, I'm advocating for my district, but all along from Houston over to Key West, the entire Gulf region, we need to invest in that to look at more than just oil. As we are a part of the United States, and if you boost this region, it's better for the entire country. Okay, a comment. Yeah, I could be on that one too, but that's not my first choice. I don't think freshmen congressmen get to pick a whole lot. Yeah, backbencher. They'll kind of put me there. But if whoever's running the House next year, that's what I'd like. Okay. Oh yeah, that's from Twitter. Celtic Tiger. All right. The question was, to repeat, what? Say it again. The first part. Okay, what should be done to ensure the rights of labor to make sure we don't end up in a capitalistic feudal system, which is exactly where we are right now. So you're saying, how should we address the current issues and the deprioritizing of unions, for example, a group that is designed to represent the workers representing themselves? It was, I believe, the right to work laws, which were falsely, in my opinion, kind of pushed through to make it seem like the unions were somehow against workers, and therefore the benevolent employers from on high were going to protect the workers better than the workers' unions, which is obviously fallacious and nonsensical from my point of view. Obviously, we encourage unions. Short version. We're always going to be pro-worker because that's my background. Everybody I know. And another way to, a form of, I don't know how to word this exactly, profit sharing, a fair wage. Everybody who works should be able to live on that wage. Oh, living wage. That's what they call that. A living wage. If a person doesn't have to work 3 jobs because the job market is strong and unemployment is very low, but everybody gets paid minimum wage, it's not necessarily a great economy, because all you're doing is working all day and all night to support your family, and you never get ahead. And it's because the employers don't pay you a fair wage because they don't have to. So, we're not advocating for an upheaval. We're just saying that if you work a job, you should be able to afford to live. It seems to be common sense, but it isn't. So obviously that's what we're for. We're trying to get through them for you here. Gerontophile. Yeah.
What would you suggest would be an way?
I'm going to address it as such. The question was, what would I? Well, what I suggest would be an economically viable way. Well, right now, obviously, and we were discussing this earlier, which I'm not going to address too much here, is the Louisiana state budget. Now, of course, COVID-19 is a pandemic, and every state is being affected all over the country, and each one, depending on their administration, how they're going to deal with all these additional costs. So obviously, and we're seeing it now with Congress taking action with these bills, the first two of the pandemic relief bills. This sort of thing isn't planned. It's once in 100 years that you have a pandemic of this scale that really interferes with people's lives. There's a lot of layoffs and unemployment, as we know. Of course, there's the human cost. There's a lot of deaths. Excuse me, and a lot of deaths specifically in the medical industry and certain vulnerable groups. And we're starting to see more information come out. But a pandemic is, it's a pandemic. It's not a good thing. So every state is going to have to react and move forward. Now, every time we have a disaster like we've had here with hurricanes, and of course, one of the more famous of our region in the last 20 years or so is Katrina, we can rebuild. We are a great nation that is capable of cooperating. Sometimes when we need to, we may react to the disaster badly, but we will rebuild afterwards. The human race is very resilient. And, we push for these solutions together and to grow and to move forward. And that is the main thing.
The legislature. I would ask for to the best of their ability that keep and state for living.
Yeah. Now, just in case you couldn't hear that, this was a discussion we had earlier, and this is where we're specifically discussing Louisiana state issues and in support for our Louisiana listeners. Call your state legislators. The budget will be affected because of all the presets they have in our budget. The only things they can really cut to make up for shortfalls, such as what are happening with the COVID-19, is healthcare and education, two of the things that are most essential for a successful region, and that's where it's going to be cut to react to the additional costs from a pandemic. So call your legislators, make sure that they don't kill, the things we need most. Good, Dave. Back in 1973 under Edwin Edwards. Yeah. We have a really weird constitution that sets limits for us. I'm sorry, I don't mean to call it weird, but it's very specific to our state that there are limits. The legislators can't just go in and just make up money out of nowhere. They can only cut certain things because everything else is pre-assigned, and therefore there's no room in that budget. Yeah. Now, John Bell just gotten us, the budget last year with a $300 million surplus. We were in, fiscally responsible shape. However, we're reacting like everybody else. So call your state legislator. That's the answer. That's a short version. It's true. Yeah. And thank you for Claire for pointing that out. Yeah. Okay. The question was, how in this politically divisive era, how are you going to reach across the aisle? I'm used to working with people with multiple points of view, and I get along with everybody, and I don't necessarily agree with ideologies. And certainly I will be very, very harsh at people who spout propaganda, irregardless of regardless of what their voters want, strictly to align with their party. I'm going to be working for the people. So how will I work across the aisle? Everything I want is good for the region. We want, more infrastructure, more education. Those are not partisan issues. Those are people issues. How we do it, that's the closed room negotiations. Republicans, Democrats have to work together. I can't tell you why some people don't. Some people are jerks. I'm not a jerk. Yeah, we've got some live ones. Sure.
argument programs raised you.
That's a valid question. That it kind of, yeah.
And how do you get
Nightmarish. Well, convincing Mitch McConnell to do anything is interesting, but let's not go into partisan attacks. That does follow the question we just had. So it's like, okay, Rob, prove it. What would you do? Okay. Climate change is divisive right now because the solutions and proposals I've seen have run counter to how things always seem to get done, which is incremental change works. So to address climate change, you really have to react to what's happening. A lot of people are talking about the particulates per million and, you know, tip over points and all that stuff. But for example, in our area, we're losing coast. This is the reality. This is not science fiction. You go out and watch people's fishing camps that were, you know, waterfront a year ago are now gone. So we specifically have to address real world issues. And presumably, if it's still a Republican Senate, it's going to have to be bipartisan. You know, Louisiana has 2 Republican senators. I can imagine they would still like to have a state to be senators of in a couple of years. So, you know, in that sense, if you appeal to the real world, it doesn't allow for partisan debate. We're not trying to, you know, hug trees. We're trying to save them. And there's not that there's anything wrong with hugging a tree. Feels good. A little scratchy. But, yeah. Hagatha. Okay. All right. These questions are on the live one, so I shouldn't have to read them. But that was Hagatha's question about what kind of feedback am I getting. I'm getting actually very good. No. Our feedback is good. Our opponent, a lot of people are very dissatisfied. He's been in there about 4 years now, and it has become very evident that he is not advocating for any sort of solutions, and he has no ideas of how to help the district. All he does is issue partisan signals to support whatever sort of wacko thing runs through his head that day. But there's no real world solutions. He's not bringing change to Louisiana. He's not improving education, healthcare, infrastructure. He's not doing anything. So we're getting a lot of feedback. You know, a lot of it is negative about his public image, which I'm in, the Cajun John Wayne. That's fine. It's a reality YouTube star image. The problem I have is that there's nothing being done. He's literally just sitting in Congress, getting paid to spout conspiracy theories. So that is problematic, and a lot of people in my district recognize that. Sorry, I didn't look at any of your notes on that. That was just my opinion.
All right.
It's all good. Hi. Hi, Gail. Hey, Gail, great question. If I have anything to say about it, yes. That's a short answer. Yeah, it is problematic. How we seem to get in bed with people who really don't align with our democratic ideals, and I'm not going to call anybody out, Saudi Arabia, but there are people that their treatment of their citizens does not fall under what we would call a free and fair democracy, and so therefore, or you know, even North Korea, who Trump seems to have a love affair with Kim Jong-un. You're not necessarily going to have to like everybody, but we do have oil production way up, and we are a net exporter of oil now. Why are we still? Well, because Saudi Arabia and Russia, whose price war, by the way, triggered this latest oil debacle, in case you didn't know. Not everybody is our ally. So, you know, every country's out for themselves. We have to have protections to protect ourselves. We do produce enough oil for ourselves. Now, I'm not, you know, a nationalist isolationist, but, you know, looking out for ourselves and our American ideals is part of what we should be doing. National security factors into it. And no, I mean, you've heard about the human rights abuses from those countries. I'm not going to go into details, but yeah, I don't like them either. So why are we dealing with them when we don't have to? That's a darn good question.
And
Hi, Dimitri.
Now
Again,
that we lost two special elections today.
25th. I think it was in Michigan. We lost them both. All right. The first and foremost is tell a friend. Believe it or not, most people don't read the New York Times to follow politics. They hear it from the neighbors. They talk about it at their gas stations. They speak on it at churches and social groups, and on, of course, Facebook and Twitter and social media, phone calls. Learn the truth. Read the news. Read the source news. Please don't read opinions. I'm not going to go into Fox News right now, but read sources. Make your own opinions. Talk people. Tell people how important this election is and the reasons it's important. And the reasons are that the rule of law itself is under threat. So, yeah, share the word. That's literally my answer. And that's what we've been doing since before this campaign started. It's literally why I started in politics in Louisiana. Is we got to get the voice out. We have to fight back against certain pockets of narratives and get, share truth, share emotions. One good way to verify news, and it's what I do and all of my staff do, is always check multiple sources. You can always look at an average. If one newspaper or news website is saying one thing, but nobody else is, maybe you should be suspect. But if you're hearing the same thing from multiples, somewhere in there is the truth. And I know not everybody has the time for that. And that's where you find your trusted people. Me, I'll never lie to you. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be pro Higgins. So if you're a Higgins supporter, you might get your news elsewhere. But nevertheless, since I follow the truth, somewhere in there, we're going to meet up in the middle. And that's, I think, part of our appeal is, I always verify information. Try just stay away from that fake news.
Okay. Okay, we have one.
We have another question upcoming here. You're welcome, Joe. From Canada.
What's your plan for universal child care?
Universal child care. Well, I think it should be universal, to answer the question. Part of the debate we have behind the scenes, and this is where we talk about with the legislation, is should it be under infrastructure? Is that is it the government's responsibility to make sure that the working class has all the support they need, or should it be part of healthcare? Because wellness care for children, if we talk about the importance of the next generation, shouldn't we have, every kid, sometimes kids going to school, the only good meal they get a day is the lunch they get at school. And sometimes those sort of subsidized daycares, we're not subsidizing, we're not giving away money. It's an investment. It behooves us to have safe children watched, cared for, so that their parents can work. And it's good for Louisiana. It's good for the country. So I don't understand why we don't have universal child care, why it's not part of it. And of course, the wealthier class is going to be able to afford the best daycare, but there should be, like minimally safe and inclusive and populated, lots of them, childcare so that everybody who works can safely have their kids looked after until they get back from work. And so I really do think that's part of healthcare. It's preventative care. It's making sure they grow up healthy, happy, educated, smart, and, off into their adult lives. Right. Yes, it is. Oklahoma has universal child care, and we do not. I'm going to fix that. Not me personally, but we're going to, it's a state issue, has everything, but we're going to work with them because, and as Claire rightfully pointed out, and I should have stressed more clearly, women are especially vulnerable because of the wage gap. And if you have a single mother, she's really going to have trouble if she has a couple of kids, making sure they have childcare so that she can work. Otherwise, you're creating a cycle of poverty if you can't let people dig their way out. And I'm sorry to wave my hands, but that's how I talk. I kind of wave my hands. How should Congress be responding to the COVID? Well, I think it would be helpful if, while taking all safety precautions and testing, both the House and the Senate were actually working. That would be a big plus for me. Now, they have addressed stimulus, of course, and there was controversy about that. It ended up being a $1,200 single one-time check, but then as the repercussions became immediately available, and that's economic as well as health, the $1,200 one-time check isn't enough. You look at what other countries are doing around the world, $2,000 a month until the economy gets back in, I believe it's Canada, but it might have been somewhere in Europe. But nevertheless, there are other countries that are doing it a little bit better. And why our country isn't stepping up? We're the richest country in the world, so we're here with the best economy of all time. Well, the economy is because of us going out to work. So we have to make sure that we can survive. And survival isn't just not getting a virus or recovering from a virus, but make sure you still have a home and don't have your utilities cut off. And, you survive in health and financially. You don't lose your house or your apartment during these troubled times while we're trying to figure out what's the best way to protect the most people. The short answer, of course, is we need a second and a third round of stimulus, probably until our politicians catch up with what everybody else seems to know, that we're hurt. And, it's our country. We want it to get better, but it needs us to do so. Next question.
Caitlin asked if they could have a chance to put Texas.
Hi, Caitlin. Yeah, I did see when she posted that. Do you have a chance to flip Texas? Well, being Texas adjacent, I could say it does seem to be taking on a purplish tinge. And I believe that you, Caitlin, and everybody can be out making sure that it flips blue. If you want to, be the change you want to see in the world, encourage all your young friends, especially, but everybody your parents' friends, your grandparents' friends. You talk about what each candidate is offering, and if you believe in the democratic principles and if you believe in helping people, share that message. Get it out there. Get your friends to vote. Carpool on election day, or if we can vote by mail, it depends on state right now. Make sure that's done. It's always been called absentee ballot before, but now it's suddenly a controversial political issue. Make sure everybody votes. If you vote, you can change things. If you don't vote, you may get to complain about stuff, but your complaint is invalid because you didn't participate. You take one grain of sand, it doesn't mean a whole lot. You take millions of grains of sand and you have a beach. So, we can do this together.
Okay,
to help us as a country to get to number one was the rest of the question. Yeah, it's breaking up. Sam's question, that's Sam, by the way. High-tech innovation is a principal driver for economic growth, with the U.S. ranking 6th in the world for technological advancements. How would I help the states who have been left behind on that to help us as a country get to number one? And I think if you see one of the highest, and I don't know the numbers because I didn't look at this study, but I bet you among the top 5 is Singapore. And if you'll look at why Singapore is so good in high-tech industry, you'd probably find that their education is very high. The more we promote education, the more we promote healthcare, and the more we promote infrastructure, we promote growth. And growth right now is into the high-tech industries. Many people don't know, for example, the video game industry has surpassed Hollywood in terms of revenue. And that's a high-tech industry, believe it or not. You're developing software that creates video games, and it's an explosive market. And so all industry should be going to that. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't make grandfather clocks anymore, but the high tech, the newer jobs require more education and more thought more creativity. So therefore they pay better, and we all lift up together. And she said, and hello, Rob, Claire, and Dave. That's from Sam.
Hello.
My first prior, wow, I don't even know where to start. That'll be next January if it happened. So we have to see where we are on the pandemic. We have to see where we are on the protecting the safety and the health of our American citizens. That's my first priority. Of course, the other things are we want to start pushing our agenda through and making those coalitions that you need with other like-minded people in Congress to create the change we need. We all want to push for healthcare, start agreeing on a way to fix healthcare. Everybody talks about healthcare. Nobody has a solution. And that's because it is very complex, and you do need a coalition to do that. And how to properly address the need for progress in our country, which to me is a reinvestment, much like FDR's programs of the 30s and the Tennessee Valley Authority led to this infrastructure boom. Under Eisenhower, we had the interstate highway system. If we get together as a country and focus on things, we can make change happen. And that's how you do it. You get a coalition. How do we make things better? By making things better. Of course, our agenda platform of that is called the GROW Act, the Gulf Region Omnibus Works Act, which is a economic development zone starting in south and moving its way up to bring our antiquated and worn out infrastructure current. Some people know. About 100 years ago is when we did most of our water pipes in this country, for example. When it was time to, put in running water in every house in the country, we sort of did that all across the country. Well, there's a lifespan on those things. And of course, now you see, especially in rural, poor areas, you see water mains going and contaminated water, and all that leads to cause from it's antiquated infrastructure. We need to not take for granted our country. We need to invest back into it, which is an investment in people. Every time you upgrade infrastructure, you're paying all those working people to build that infrastructure. And they're all spending those paychecks in their regions, and which is better for real estate. It's better for retail. It's a cliche, but a rising tide lifts all boats. Spending money back on ourselves to make sure we're all healthy and have good roads and good public Wi-Fi, and we're all wired together on this wonderful new thing they call the internet. All of that makes the country better, which makes quality of life better. Equal wages, universal child care, as we just talked about, all the things that help working class folks find their own success. I hope that answers it.
Karen asked, does the Supreme Court need extra justice or
No, I've heard this debate before, and my answer is going to be really short, or I can be really long, depending on what we got. Yeah, and Dave is writing the correct advice on the board. A lot of things, those things are speculative, and the reason people ask about them is if they're dissatisfied with the way things in, they want to know if there's ways to change it so that it can be more beneficial to us. I think you have to believe in the system. I'm not particularly fond of the way the Supreme Court's set up right now either. But things go in cycles, and just keep pushing for them to get better. Elect a Democratic president, elect some Democrats in Congress, and you'll get more justices to reflect the will of the working people in the United States.
I think a lot of questions. Go ahead and get them in.
Yep, we're coming up on the end. If anybody has any questions, get them in now. Speak now, forever hold your peace, so to speak. Until next week. We're doing these weekly now, by the way, because I'm that kind of guy, and I'm here for you. Call your friends, call your family, tell them to vote. Tell them to vote for me. Oh, a question for Claire.
One question for Claire.
May I take the screen for a second?
All right, just for a second, we're going to introduce you here to Dave Longlane. He's going to jump on the screen to answer that question.
So this is me, and I'm wearing
And thank you for engaging in the democratic process. And we did have a comment there. I'm gonna. It says from Hagatha, I'm doing my part over here in Texas for the blue wave. Go Hagatha. Yes, you are. We're all in this together. That's the main thing I have to. You know, a lot of people didn't have that beacon of hope, and we're trying to inspire people that yeah, it can really happen. We're here in a tough district, southern Louisiana. It's full of good people. If we can change, anybody can change. So, you know, just get out, talk to people, canvas, volunteer for your campaigns. If you don't have any money, I understand, you know, not everybody can donate to campaigns, but get out and, you know, volunteer to write postcards, to make phone calls, support your candidates, get the people you want elected. And that's how you get people elected, by getting them elected. It just seems like that answers itself. But I don't mean that to be glib. I mean that literally you have to get involved. If you're upset, get involved. No, it was a comment. She said, I'm doing my part. Yeah. Let me, I'm going to scroll up on my screen. Can you see this? This is the only one I see too. Or did he or she put one? Yes, read. Well, I don't see a question there, SB. Or was it one that was submitted earlier? Okay. Yeah, Canada. And I happen to agree with you, Gail. It says, oh, okay. Yeah, we're not going to answer yours, and I'll tell you why later, SB Johnson. Because we're not at a debate. Where this is, we'll answer that one later. Just for transparency, we got a question in the advance. You can see him on Twitter, and I might answer it on there. But the reason being, we're not trying to give our opponent airtime, basically. So, Gail, if Canada can do, oh, and she said hi, Claire. If Canada can do healthcare, why can't the United States? Well, obviously we can. We do not, and that is because I think we can't agree on a method to transitions because we are the United States. We like to be number one in everything, especially when we're number 20 or number 33. I don't remember where we are in the world's healthcare rankings, but I think it was 33. Yeah, I mean, you know, we can be, and you again, elect the right officials who want that for us. Ultimately, every single man, woman, and child in the United States should be covered under some sort of healthcare plan. That's my approach. You know, the specifics are obviously going to be hammered out, but get people who want that. That's the end goal, not what the market can afford, not the best way to make pharmaceutical companies a lot of money. We're not going to get into that. Everybody should have health care. That's the goal. And I think that puts us at tail end, except for Chicago Mike's question, correct?
Yes.
Chicago Mike.
Tough question here.
Tough question. All right, I got it. It will make or break my campaign. Okay. All right. And local folks will know that there was another one that was suspiciously left off of that list. The answer was, what hot sauce is best? Is Frank's red hot sauce, Crystal hot sauce, or Louisiana brand hot sauce? And of course, the correct answer is Louisiana brand hot sauce, mixed with Frank's red hot sauce and Crystal's. Blasphemy.
Wait.
All of them mixed together. It was a joke. It was a political answer. In my fridge at home, we have Louisiana brand hot sauce. How's that? Yeah, we're not starting our hot sauce. I think that was all the questions. And even though it's a few minutes early, I really love talking to you all, but I also really love when I sign off. So, you know, God bless. No, I love my peoples. If there are no more questions for tonight, we did catch up to everything. Thank you again for participating in the democratic process. It may look a little casual, but we actually put the work in here. And what we're demonstrating is, yes, we will be accountable and accessible and truthful throughout whatever aspect of the political career we're at, from candidate to if I actually get elected. I will still answer your questions, and I'll answer them honestly. And if I don't know the answer, I'm going to find out the answer. And that's what we're showing. So join us here next week. Well, actually, should we promote one Friday, or we just leave that separate? We do have a special event coming up this year, sponsored by elements from
like sort of political organization.
Basically, the Yang Gang is getting with us, and we're going to be doing a town hall Friday night, 8:20 p.m. Central Time. Don't have all the details yet, but the slot was set out, and it's exciting news. We're definitely going to tweet about it. We'll post about it on Facebook. Just giving a little shout out tonight. So again, check me out on Twitter at Rob Anderson 2018. You and many dozens of other people will be following me. And of course, on Facebook at Rob Anderson for Louisiana. And the website is robandersonforcongress.com. Thank you all. It's been a lot of fun as always. Your questions were for the most part good. And some of them were really great and some of them were funny. But thank you all, and I'll see you next time.